Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, hello. Whenever it is you are watching this video, I appreciate you taking the time to watch it. So what we're going to be doing with this homework video is a little bit of graphing. If you'll notice, our standard down there has changed. Analyze production possibilities curves to explain choice, scarcity, and opportunity cost. So basically, we are about to develop a visual, a graph, if you will, that visually demonstrates scarcity, trade-offs, and opportunity costs. Now, if you take a look at the Unit 1 overall unit essential question, scarcity requires people and societies to make economic decisions about how to utilize limited resources. A production possibilities curve is a visual way that people, entrepreneurs, businesses, and societies, such as governments, can actually visually see their trade-offs and opportunity costs on a graph. Now, we only have one LEQ for this particular video, and it is how can trade-offs and opportunity costs be shown on a production possibilities curve. So henceforth, production possibilities curves are going to be called PPCs. Like, now that you guys know that it's called a production possibilities curve, we abbreviate it PPC because production possibilities curve is just a mouthful to say, and I try to be as efficient as possible. All right, so here's what I want you guys, this is the mindset that I want you to get on. Think about trade-offs businesses must make when deciding how to use the factors of production to produce a good or service. So if you imagine the assembly line at the Ford motor plant in Michigan. So Ford produces F-150s, they do the Ford Mustang, they do the Ford Fusion, they do the Ford Explorer, so on and so forth. So because of scarcity, Ford cannot produce an unlimited number of F-150s. They can't produce an unlimited number of Ford Explorers. And in fact, if they were to increase the production of F-150s, where do those resources come from? Unless they got more natural resources or increase the factors of production, if they increase their land, labor, and capital, they could produce more. But if land, labor, and capital remain the same, they would have to produce less Explorers or less Mustangs in order to increase production of F-150s. So PPCs represent the maximum number of combinations of goods and services that companies or individuals or nations can produce. Now, here's the textbook definition of a PPC. It is a graph showing the maximum combination of goods and services that can be produced from a fixed amount of resources. Now, think about the example I just did. If Ford Motor Company were to increase the land, labor, and capital, then yes, they could produce more F-150s without sacrificing Ford Explorers or whatever. However, if the land, labor, and capital are to remain the same, a fixed resource, a fixed amount of resources, then they are going to have to sacrifice somewhere. Now, why do we do PPCs? Because they say visual. It's so much easier to see things than to think about them in our minds. Remember, class, I'll say it a lot, the mind is a dangerous place to store information. So PPCs help people and businesses and individuals and governments visually determine how much of a good or service to produce, thus revealing the trade-offs and opportunity costs involved in each decision. All right, so let's actually see what it looks like. Okay, so let's take a look at this example. Now, what you see here is what a PPC looks like. It is a very simple graph. Now, you guys are looking at the axes right now, the labels, guns and butter. It's a metaphor. I do not know why. I do not know how it got started. I was taught PPCs with the same example. My economics professors were taught PPCs with the same example. Somehow the economics gods came up with guns and butter as the best example. Now, here's the thing. They do not, when I'm saying guns and butter, we are not literally talking about guns that you shoot and butter that you spread on a toast. It's a metaphor. So the metaphor is as follows. Guns represent the United States government spending tax dollars on military expenditures. Butter represents the United States government spending money on things like education, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, welfare expense. So again, I want to emphasize it is a metaphor. Now, there's a few things I want you to notice about my graphs. First and foremost, my graphs are not pretty. This is not a math class, so your graphs do not have to be pretty at all. Also, I do not have labels for the axis numbers, and in fact, I just made these numbers up. So right now, let's go ahead and give them a characteristic. So let's say that the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this represents spending in billions of dollars, okay? So if you were to spend if you get a 3 there, that's $3 billion as butter expenditures. Once again, guys, we're not talking about spending money on butter. Butter represents Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, education. things that the United States government spend our tax dollars on. And then we have, $5 billion of guns, so on and so forth. So we'll say it's billions of dollars. Now, if this were a math class with some math teachers, they would be eating me alive right now because my graph is not set up properly. Once again, this is not math, this is economics. I'm much more concerned that you understand the big picture behind the numbers. Now, without teaching you all a darn thing, let me ask you this question. Class, if the United States government was to spend $5 billion on guns, once again, that is military expenditures, how much money would be left over to spend on butter? Chances are you guys would say zero. If you say zero, you are correct. Good job. Class, if the United States government was to spend $4 billion on butter expenditures, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, education, welfare expenses, how much money is left to spend on guns? Without graphing anything, you guys could probably just tell me $1 billion, and that's absolutely correct. Now, let's do something like this. PPCs are actually designed to be used. Now, my lines are not going to line up perfectly because I'm a human being and my lines are not straight. But let's just say that, okay, well, what if you were to produce $3 billion worth of guns? You come up to where it touches the line again. I know this line is not perfect, but you guys can do the math. That leaves us with $2 billion to spend on butter. Very, very simple stuff. Let's do one more example. Okay, let's do our trade-offs in the afternoon between TV and time spent studying. So we're pretending that in any given afternoon, we'll say this is 5 hours. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours in any given afternoon. So if you were to spend 5 hours watching TV, that leaves you 0 hours of studying. So if we were to spend 2 hours watching TV, how many hours of studying does that allow us to do? And again, I am aware it is not lining up perfectly because my graphs look terrible. That leaves us 3 hours of studying to do. So there are a few notes on PPCs. I'd like you guys to just write these down, put them in your notes, and I'll go through them. They're going to make more sense once we get to the graphing. So here we go. PPCs show the maximum combination of goods and services that can be produced in a set period of time. That's basically the definition of a PPC. Now let's expand on that. The amount of goods and services that can be produced are limited by the availability of the factors of production. Now, when we get to the graphing here in just a moment, I'm going to show you what this looks like on a graph. So keep in mind, guys, PPCs show trade-offs and opportunity cost. Trade-offs and opportunity cost exist because of what? So PPCs show trade-offs and opportunity cost. They just visually show it. Trade-offs and opportunity costs exist because of what? Scarcity. Okay. Now, here's something important to know. Now, some students get confused here, especially on the project that we're going to be starting here shortly. PPCs show trade-offs and opportunity costs between what can be produced, not trade-offs and opportunity costs between things like differences of opinions or preferences, because one cannot produce, that is, you cannot offer to sell opinions or preferences. Now, I normally wouldn't put that in there, but the past several semesters I've had students be confused there. They'll try to do the PPC between people who prefer Androids and people who prefer iPhones, and that simply does not work because they are not producing anything. So let's go into, okay, so what we have here is the PPC for Jarrett's Jewelry. If I were to produce if I were to become an entrepreneur behind a jewelry store. Don't think I'd ever do that, but that's the example we're going with. Now, one thing I want you guys to notice are these maximum numbers over here. Now, in all the examples sorry, that's supposed to just circle the 8. In all the examples that we have done in class and all the examples from the homework videos, these numbers have matched up. We've had like 5 and 5 and 10 and 10. There is no rule saying that these numbers must match up. In fact, they do not have to. Here's why. PPCs show how the factors of production produce a good or service. Some goods and services require more or less of the factors of production than others. For example, in this particular case, I want you guys to think about this for a moment. What do you think requires more of the factors of production to produce? Just look at the numbers. Earrings or bracelets? The answer is earrings, and here's why. So you mean to tell me for every 8 bracelets I produce, I can produce 0 earrings? Yet I can only produce 3 earrings if I produce 0 bracelets? In other words, the land, labor, and capital needed to produce earrings is much higher than or requires more resources than the land, labor, and capital needed to produce bracelets. Okay, so again, I just want to summarize there. There's no rule saying that these numbers on the end that are circled in red must match. That was just a coincidence by example that we did in class yesterday and in last night's homework video. All right, there's another thing I want to point out. This line right here, this line that connects the maximums on our graph, this line has a name, and it's called the limit line. It's called the limit line. All right, the reason it's the limit line is because, guys, think about the definition of a PPC. It represents the maximum combination of goods and services. In other words, when the factors of production are being utilized efficiently, this is the maximum combination of goods and services that can be produced. Let me say that again. The limit line represents when the factors of production are being utilized most efficiently. So at maximum output, I can produce 3 earrings and 0 bracelets. At maximum output, at maximum land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, I can produce 8 bracelets and 0 earrings, and so on and so forth. It's called the limit line, and it represents the maximum output when all factors of production are utilized properly. Okay. So let's do an example like this. Let's say I were to do something like this. Oh, let's say we're going to produce 1 earring and we'll stop there, and 3 bracelets. What happened? I'm not touching the limit line. What does this represent? So I want you guys to think about this. I'm purposely not touching the limit line. So what does it mean when my dot is inside of my PPC? If the limit line represents when all factors of production are being used efficiently, are being used to their maximum abilities, if I were to have a production inside of my PPC, inside of the limit line, that means that the factors of production are not being used efficiently, or they are being used inefficiently. So right here, it's looking like somewhere along the lines, the land is off, the laborers are not working hard enough, someone needs to get fired, or maybe the capital is inefficient, maybe a machine broke down and that caused my production to go lower. So this is not good. This means something is wrong in the factors of production, leading to decreased productivity and inefficient use of the factors of production. Let's do yet another example. Let's say we do something like this. Let's say we were gonna, we want to produce 3 earrings and 5 bracelets. Okay? What does this mean? If this is the limit line, guys, this is when the land, labor, capital are all working effectively, no one needs to be fired, the land is there, the machines, tools, and equipment are working properly. This is the maximum efficiency. What this represents right here is something that is impossible with the current resource, with the current factors of production. This right here, even when everything is running smoothly and working fine, we simply do not have enough factors of production. We do not have enough resources. We are subject to scarcity to meet this demand right here, to meet this production right here. We cannot do it. It is impossible. The only way we could do that is if we were to increase our resources, if we were to increase the factors of production, if we were to buy more land, hire more workers, buy more capital, maybe then we can meet that production. But with our current amount of land, labor, and capital, we cannot meet that production right there. All right, very good. Let us move on to another example. Let's go back to the guns and butter example. But notice in this video, they do not match up. I made these numbers up because remember, guys, we're not concerned about the details of these graphs. We're concerned about the big picture. All right, so if I were to produce if the U.S. government, were to produce 4 units of butter, that leaves us 0 units of guns. If they were to produce 8 units of guns, that leaves us with 0 units of butter. So if I were to produce, let's say 3 units of butter, I would be able to produce 2 units of guns. Now keep in mind, 3 plus 2 does not equal 8. But we know now that the limit line is subject to the factors of production. That the X and Y axis, the numbers do not have to be equal because according to this, it takes more factors of production to produce butter than it does guns, just according to my example. So here's what I want to show you guys. I've been telling you the past 2 or 3 days, PPCs represent trade-offs and opportunity cost. So let me ask you guys this. Let's pretend that I'm producing 4 units of butter and 0 units of guns. In order to produce a certain amount of units of guns, what must I give up in order to produce guns? Okay, so I must give up butter. If I want to free up enough resources, free up enough land, labor, capital to produce guns, I need to give up producing some butter. So in this particular example class, what is the opportunity cost of producing 3 units of butter and 2 units of guns? So here we go. I must give up this amount right here. That's an arrow, by the way. I must give up 1 unit of butter, whether it's $1 billion or whatever. I must give up 1 unit of butter in order to gain this amount of civilian goods, because I started at 0. So this right here is what I gained. So to answer my original question, I must give up 1 unit of butter to gain 2 units of guns. So my opportunity cost, remember guys, opportunity cost is the cost of the foregone option or the next best alternative. So the next best alternative in this case is what I gave up. So what did I give up, guys? I gave up producing 1 unit of butter. U.S. Congress decided it would be best to spend more money on guns. So this right here, giving up that 1 unit of butter, that represents my opportunity cost. My trade-off was sacrificing 1 unit of butter to produce 2 units of guns. And remember, all opportunity costs are also trade-offs. So in this example, that trade-off is also an opportunity cost, moving from that point to that point. Okay, so I wanted to put this slide up there for you guys one more time. Hopefully after seeing the visuals, the graphs that we just did, these will make a little bit more sense to you. So the key things to know are about the limit line, how it represents the maximum combination of goods and services that can be produced when the factors of production are being used efficiently in a set period of time, and how PPCs can only show production possibilities. It's in the name. PPCs have nothing to do with opinions or preferences or things like that. And all they do, they show the visual between trade-offs and opportunity costs. So time for our LEQ in review. How can trade-offs and opportunity costs be shown on a PPC? PPCs show the maximum combination of goods and services, that is, the factors of production are being used most efficiently from a fixed amount of resources in a given period of time. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you found the examples helpful. I'll see you all in class tomorrow.